Welcome to CyberMAYnia, cyber talks with the brightest minds in cybersecurity. Discussing risks, AI, emerging threats, workforce challenges, and more. With your host, May Brooks.
Hello and welcome to another episode of CyberMAYnia. With me today is the phenomenal, wonderful Keren Elazari. Keren, how are you today?
Thank you, May. So happy to join your podcast. Finally, I'm doing well, excited, and looking forward to our conversation. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, as always, we start this conversation in the same way, although I'm guessing a lot of my listeners know you, but still, tell us a little bit about you, yourself, what sparked your initial interest in this crazy world we call cybersecurity.
Okay, tell you just a bit or maybe a bite. So I've been a hacker for most of my life. I started my path as a very curious little girl in the 90s, learning about how the internet worked by taking web pages apart and basically understanding how the HTML code worked so that I could write my own code. I was learning a lot of interesting things about the basic fundamental protocols the internet runs on, like TCP/IP and DNS. And in the process, I was finding answers to my many questions, sometimes on other people's computers or on servers all around the world and data centers here, there, and everywhere. I didn't know it at the time, but my activities were actually early hacking. Only when I met my hacker mentor in the movie Hackers, Angelina Jolie, 1995, my imagination was really sparked by that film. It led me on the path I'm still on today, a path that's been dedicated to everything we can learn from hackers and to proving to the world not all hackers are bad guys, and there are many friendly hackers and hacker girls as well.
Absolutely. And you actually talked about it in your 2014, I think it was, TED Talk. You talked about how hackers are the internet immune system, and we had a lot of conversations about it over the years. And if you can share a little bit about what makes you see hackers in that way.
Of course. So in 2014, I was very fortunate to be invited to speak at the International TED Conference, and I knew it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to speak for 16 minutes, but in front of an audience of millions of people. And I took that chance to really bring my vision that not all hackers are bad. And I was really inspired by the concept of our own physical immune system. You know, we each have millions and billions of cells, bacteria that are part of our microbiome, and they're not all bad. In fact, they are a big part of what makes us us, and they are a part of our immune system. I was inspired by that concept to talk about how friendly hackers out there in the world are helping us by finding vulnerabilities, fixing problems, and how even the bad hackers, even malicious actors, cybercriminals, spies, and different types of bad guys who are really doing things for bad purposes, even though their motivations are negative, their actions can also spark us to evolve. They actually force us to demand updates from our technology. They force us to demand better security practices from the companies that we rely on, from the governments that are supposed to protect us. So I see a lot of potential there. I see hackers as a transformational force. That's the message I shared in 2014, and I've recently revisited that, and I've really started speaking about how now in the age of AI, we really have to have all the help we can get, all the human hackers help we can get to forge a path in this new world, a world where criminals are enjoying a renaissance of malicious innovations fueled by generative AI and other technologies. We need all the help we can get. We need more friendly hackers out there. And you know, I like to say, May, we need to build our own digital immunity. So it's not just about hackers as the immune system. It's about all of us building our digital immunity, understanding how ecosystem approaches can help us be safer. So that's my main message. That's what my security research is focused on. My writing, speaking, and my research is all about. And I'm happy to share more if you're interested.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned generative AI. And I think that today, as you mentioned, the bad actors have a renaissance of tools at their disposal, and actually this morning I had a conversation with a fellow CISO that told me that they completely block AI in their organization. Why? Because they don't have a policy yet. And I understand that. I understand we can't just give people access to AI without considering the cybersecurity and risk factors associated with it. But as you just said, if they have those tools, we need to have the same tools to keep ourselves safe, to use them in our organizations to enhance the immune system. I want to steer away from hackers because you also serve as an advisor to so many companies. I want to ask you a little bit about how you see the perception towards cybersecurity, innovation, maybe even generative AI change in the perspective of executives and how they approach cybersecurity.
Absolutely, May. So I think you might agree with me, and I hope your audience might agree with me as well. Chief security officers nowadays, and even executives in the board, so a financial officer or a chief commercial officer of a company, and certainly a CEO, needs to be a lot more educated about cybersecurity. And that's not just my opinion or yours, it's also part of new regulation that's coming. So a lot of governments, a lot of governing organizations and regulators are requiring companies to understand a lot better what's happening with that company's cybersecurity footprint, what's happening with their data, what's happening with their data protection initiatives. And this is something that CEOs can no longer hide behind a statement that's, that's something my IT guy takes care of, this is something my CISO takes care of, and I trust my CISO, she knows what she's doing, so I don't have to know about it. That's no longer the case. We're seeing a lot of stories where the board of directors, the leadership of a company is required to do more, to know more, to make decisions, to make those decisions faster. Like in the example you just gave, whether this company will allow or disallow employees to use generative AI. It's not just a cybersecurity company, it's not just a cybersecurity decision, right? It's a productivity decision, it's a data protection decision, it's a confidentiality and legal liability decision. So these are the types of things that are getting fused into the decision-making of leadership. Cybersecurity, AI, technology, it's all something that leaders have to be aware of, even if a company doesn't think of themselves as being in that space. I know, you recently were part of a conversation online. We are members of so many groups. And in one of them, I talked about a specific company, and a member of our group said, well, is that a cybersecurity company? And I mentioned, and I think you'll agree with me, that pretty much every company nowadays has to have a cybersecurity awareness, whether they are in retail, manufacturing, transportation, hospitality, finance, healthcare, education, the nonprofit sector. Every organization, in the same way that it's a target for cybercriminals, needs to have cybersecurity as a topic, as an issue that leaders are aware of. So that's one thing with regards to how things are changing. But the second, the flip side of that, you also mentioned innovation. This is one of my key research areas, how incredibly innovative cyber criminals are. It's no coincidence, since COVID-19, since the pandemic began, throughout the past 3 or 4 years, really criminals have doubled down on developing new techniques, new business models, new initiatives, new attack vectors, and they're not slowing. In fact, we know from law enforcement action and from exposures of different ransomware groups, we know that they invest back into their R&D. In some cases, they invest 25% of their profits into their R&D. What
that's
company?
Insane.
Yeah, it's unheard of, right? It's unheard of, especially if you remember that their profits are also net. They don't pay taxes. Maybe they have to pay bribes or whatnot to the
law enforcement.
Law enforcement in the specific countries in which they act, so that they don't get arrested. And we all know which country we're speaking about here. But they are really making millions of money. Actually, 2023, last year, was the most successful year ever for ransomware. According to actual analysis of Bitcoin and other blockchain transactions in other cryptocurrencies, ransomware operators received more than $1 billion in payments. So this is not the cost of damages. These are the actual payments that have gone through to ransomware operators throughout the Bitcoin blockchain and other cryptocurrency blockchains. This is legit research done by a company called Chain Analysis. They're specialists in these types of investigations. $1 billion in net profits. Now imagine 25% of that goes into R&D. That's the type of innovation force of nature that we're dealing with here in terms of what criminals are doing. So if we're not innovating, or even just thinking about how our cybersecurity approaches can be updated for 2024, 25, and beyond, we're already fighting the battle of 5 years ago. That's my message. And dear listeners, if you only take away one thing from today's call, I encourage you, adapt and evolve, because bad guys are doing it. And if you stay put, you're not going to have a winning chance.
Absolutely. I loved what you said about innovation. We know that they invest a lot of money into R&D, and I think that they're not only innovative, I think they're also very creative. And that's, people tend to underestimate hackers. They forget that it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they can hire very capable and very creative people to do their biddings. And I think we have to adapt. I completely agree with you there.
Yeah. One
so
example of such creativity, May, we saw with the Lockbit ransomware gang. For those unaware, Lockbit is probably the kingpin of ransomware. They were the pioneers of the ransomware as a service distribution model, which is a big part of why ransomware is such a big problem. With the ransomware as a service model, the criminals can develop their ransomware kits, they deliver it with cloud infrastructure, and they recruit affiliates to basically find targets and infect those targets with all the resources and infrastructure prepared, and those affiliates will then have to pay a commission, about 20% of the take, back to the original developers. Now, Lockbit, they are so creative, not just in their infrastructure and the business model, they also did publicity stunts, like offering payments to people who would tattoo the logo of Lockbit on their body. Or
be a brand ambassador of a ransomware.
Yes,
it's incredible, honestly.
In the words of the Lockbit kingpin himself, Lockbit Sap, the way he said it, affiliates come and go, but Lockbit is eternal. And for those cyber criminals, there's images, there's dozens of people who've gone ahead and tattooed themselves with the logo of this criminal gang, which has just recently been under scrutiny from law enforcement. Lockbit Sap, the kingpin, is currently wanted for a $10 million bounty. So, dear listeners, if you have any clues as to his whereabouts, his or hers, although we know his identity, the FBI has revealed it. It's a he, not a girl. Unsurprising. So that's a $10 million bounty. And I think despite law enforcement action, which is really ramped up, and I have to give that credit where it's due, the FBI, the UK's National Crime Agency, the Netherlands police force, other police forces around the world, Europol, they've really done incredible work in the past few years, especially in the last 6 months, to take down groups like Black Cat and Alpha V, like Lockbit, like other criminal campaigns and botnets. Every time one of these groups is taken down, a new one pops up, maybe 3 or 4 other ones pop up, they rebrand, regroup, come up with a new creative strategy, a new business model. So it is an ongoing journey and a battle.
It
a battle
is like,
of wits.
Like whack-a-mole. We talked a little bit about how you've seen the executives change their perspective towards cybersecurity over the years. Like myself, you've been in this industry for over 20 years. We're getting older, but better.
Can you see the white hairs? Oh no, it's covered up with red.
See. Advantages.
Yeah, but I have a few white hairs hiding.
I found one. I was very pleased with it. It means that I'm getting wiser, I think.
Old and wise, indeed.
Old and wise and white. So I want to ask you a little bit, how do you see the general public's, when I used to say 15 years ago, I work in cybersecurity, people looked at me like, what does that mean? I see a lot of change in how people perceive cybersecurity and understand cybersecurity. I want to hear from your perspective as a hacker, what do you see?
Wow, great question, May. So I've really experienced the public's change in approach, where I first was interested in this. I was perceived as a geek, a freak, a weirdo, an aficionado of technology, a lot of different, a nerd, a lot of different names. But I was happy with my few hacker friends and with my hobby, my passion that became my career, became my path in life. But over the years, I've seen how incredibly influential cybersecurity has become, and certainly how much of a big business it has become, how much of a multi-billion-dollar industry it's become, not just for cyber criminals, but also for defenders and cybersecurity companies providing products and services. What I'm seeing from the general public, if I may, it's a little bit of a graph like that. So you know the normal distribution, right? There's a bunch of people that are really aware of what's happening, hyper paranoid, really aware. They're into what's happening. They're reading news. They're reaching out to me. They're asking me, what about this new type of phishing using QR codes? How can I be prepared? What do you think is happening in Telegram? You know, people are kind of trying to be ahead of the curve, the literal curve. Then on the other side of the curve, there's quite a few people that are still thinking, well, it's not really my problem. I'm using my phone, I'm using Facebook, I'm shopping online. Cybersecurity is like this thing that maybe the gentlemen and ladies in the top military units and government agencies, they're out there protecting me and I don't really have to think about it too much. And if maybe I fall for an online scam, I'll just cancel my credit card and you know I'll get a new credit card in the mail a couple days later. That's kind of like the two edges of the curve. In between, I think we have a lot of people that are actually right now really afraid, so aware of the dangers, but are not as educated about what they can do about it. And this is where I want to celebrate your efforts, May, because you've been doing so much to reach that general population, to provide resources about cybersecurity and safety, about education for parents and educators, for that younger generation as well. So I think this is a really crucial element in our ecosystem. If I go back to my immune system analogy, right? We can't really build a practical immune system based on the 10% or 5% of people at this side of the curve that are super paranoid and aware and on top of things. We really kind of have to enlist that 80% of people that are in that middle of the curve and help them with tools and resources and education. And I really think, May, you're doing amazing work there. I'm trying myself to advise and work with companies and projects that are going to help address that a little bit and try to provide people with technologies that can help them make better security decisions every day and protect themselves and their loved ones. And I try to speak about this in every opportunity that I get. It's not about those fierce cyber warriors, those soldiers or gentlemen from MI whatever or 82 bazillion hundred, that doesn't matter. It really is about everybody. It's about everyday people making better security decisions each day. We can invest billions of dollars with the latest security technologies, and yet still we're going to have people fall prey to frauds, scam, phishing emails, messages, deep fakes, which we haven't even gotten to that, but that's a huge growing part of the cyber criminal ecosystem, is all about using deep fake voices and videos even. So it really is about educating people, and that's the key.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. As you know, I always say in my talks that it's not about technology, it's about people. It's about human behavior. And when you understand that, people tell me, but can't all those wizard kids from the NSA and 8200 and whatever build us a cybersecurity silver bullet? Well, no, because again, it's not a technological problem, it's a human problem. So we have to educate ourselves. I want to address the elephant in the room. Okay. The fact that we are now two women in cybersecurity, both with very similar backgrounds as hackers, as researchers, in a very male-dominant, let's call it, industry. And you've been one of the trailblazers in this industry, talking about diversity. And I actually remember one of our conversations probably more than 10 years ago. Then I told you, well, I don't want anyone to talk to me just because I'm a woman. If you call me to speak or do whatever, it's because I'm a professional. And at some point, I actually changed my perspective because I realized there are aren't enough women out there. And as I said, you're a trailblazer. Yes, we talked about the TED, but it's not the only thing you've done. You've done so many things. You've been a speaker in so many events, from DEF CON, NATO, B-Sides Tel Aviv coming up real soon, end of the month. RSA. Honestly, I think you've done it all. And one of the things that you've done for our industry that personally and professionally I thank you for is founding Leading Cyber Ladies. And I want to ask you a little bit of what led to founding this group, a little bit about this group. How do you see things change over the years?
Of course. So other than the fact you called us elephants, I think this is a really important
Pink elephants.
Okay, I'll go with red. Firstly, I have to give credit where credit's due. Back in 2015, after I did my TED Talk, I returned to Israel and I had a lot of press coverage as being the first Israeli woman to speak at the International TED Conference. And there was an opportunity there with all that coverage and PR. And a friend reached out to me. She's also a cybersecurity executive. Her name is Hila Miller.
And she was here, and we love her very much.
So, a guest on the podcast,
Yes, of course.
Of course, link to the episode in the show notes.
I will do.
So Hila called me up and she said, listen, Keren, you're visible, you're everywhere, you're speaking there. I've seen you in all the events. I know, and you know, that there are other women in our industry. Where are they? Why are they hiding? Why are they not as visible, as vocal, as present on stages so that we may inspire the next generation of women? Because you can't be what you can't see. I was lucky to see a Hollywood movie with Angelina Jolie as a teenage hacker and decide this is what I want to become and have that path become available to me. It was a stroke of luck. You know, I won the lottery, I think, in finding that movie in our local video library. So today, the goal that we have with the organization, it all started with Hila, with her idea. She said, let's bring women together. Let's bring women who are cybersecurity leaders together in our group, Leading Cyber Ladies, so that we can create that platform, we create that visibility, we create those opportunities, those networking chances for those women that are already successful and prominent to show their work, to speak their voice, to be heard and seen. And we can bring more women into our industry by doing that. So our mission statement with Leading Cyber Ladies is to increase diversity, equality, and representation in the cybersecurity ecosystem. Since then, almost a decade has passed. While we started with 30 ladies in Israel, we now have more than 3,000 ladies all around the world with active chapters meeting quarterly in Tokyo, Japan, Toronto, Canada, London, United Kingdom, and of course right here in Israel. And we'll have our next meetup at the end of the month, just a few days before B-Sides Tel Aviv and during Tel Aviv Cyber Week, which is Israel's largest cybersecurity conference. The way I see things are changing. I think, you know, the numbers speak for themselves, right? From 30 ladies to 3,000, from an industry that was known as being very male-dominated, from events that you would look at. I would go to a hacker event or a cybersecurity conference and I would look around. I would struggle to see anybody that looks like me. I would struggle to see any women or people identifying as women. I would struggle to see young women, even if I saw some executive women leaders on stage that are already kind of built their career and they're at the top of their game. I struggled to find people who are on the same kind of level where I was 20 years ago. That has changed. I can tell you it's changed. I'm grateful for that. I see it. I see it all around the world, not just at events in Israel, but in Europe, in the Middle East, in America, in the United States, in Mexico, even in Canada, certainly, and even with our communities in Japan and other locations. I'm seeing that there are more and more young women interested in a cybersecurity career, finding the courage, finding that curiosity to pursue it. And it is really my goal to make our profession, our cybersecurity world, be more accessible to younger women. That's another initiative I want to spend some time mentioning, and thank you, May, for giving me the platform to do that. And that's the Hackeriot hackathon. And that's coming up in September 2024. It's an initiative that's been running for a couple of years, and it's all about making cybersecurity entry-level positions more accessible to young women, computer science students, women from Orthodox religious background or from the Arab Israeli minority, women who won't normally get that easy ticket into the industry by serving in a elite unit or by being part of a specific milieu. Rather, the idea is to make our industry accessible to more types of women in different paths and different backgrounds. And that hackathon is coming up at the end of September 2024, again hosted by Tel Aviv University, who have been our partners for quite some time, so kudos to them. If any listeners are curious to learn more about B-Sides TLV, about leading cyber ladies, or about the Hackeriot, please feel free to reach out to me, or Google is your friend.
And we'll link, yes, and we'll use, I'll add all the relevant links to this podcast. It's going to be a great resource. And yeah, well, I had a lot of conversations around diversity, equality, inclusion. We also talk about it a lot in the ISC2 board of directors. One of the things I love about our board is it's very diverse. We're 13 board members, 7 women, 6 men from various ethnical groups, places around the world. We're trying to keep it very diverse. Now, it's at the end of the day, it's a vote by our members, but that shows that our members also appreciate diversity and equality. And I think that if we want to stay ahead of the curve, as we talked about before, our adversaries are not all white, middle-aged dudes. Our adversaries are from all forms of life. And if we want to have any chance of keeping up with them, we have to be more diverse in our teams. And
it's an interesting point. Whenever there's an investigation, a law enforcement investigation, uncovering cyber criminal campaigns, it's a question I always have with me is whether there are any cyber criminals who are women. And there are very few, at least very few that have been arrested, very few that we know of. So there's rumors of a couple that I know of, but really I could probably count the number of cyber criminal women that I know of or that are rumored to exist on 2 hands. And that's interesting. I wonder why is that? Maybe it's because we don't know about them and they are just more clever than the other guys who get caught, or maybe there is something else there about maybe similar to the statistic you'll see in organized crime and other forms of criminal initiatives, where women will tend to stay away from those alternative lifestyles, shall we call it.
So that's actually interesting because, you're absolutely right. From what I know, I don't see we do see an increase in representation of women in cybersecurity. Not huge, we're not at 50-50, but we're getting there. I think recent studies show that women make up around 24% of this industry, which is not bad because for many years it used to be 12%.
Yes.
And it was there for so many years. So now at 24, I feel lucky.
And the ISC Square actually has the workforce report. I want to point out that I got my CISSP certification almost 20 years ago, if you can believe it, around 2007. I was one of the first here in my local niche in Israel to get it. And I remember that one of my motivations for getting that accreditation was to have a more equal or maybe a more substantial chance in the workplace, in the marketplace of employees, because I knew that as a woman I might be discriminated against. I kind of doubled down on having the diplomas and the accreditations to kind of help build up my CV. And of course, I let my work, my experience, my knowledge, my insight speak for itself and kind of help my prospects in the workforce. But I believed, and I still believe, that these types of accreditations, like the CISSP, are doing a lot to actually help our diverse workforce really excel. I think if you're a hiring organization and you're looking at a couple of candidates and one of them has that designation, the CISSP, and they also happen to be a woman, I think the CSSP is really helpful. And that's true. I think you'll find it's true with other certifications in other areas of our industry. But I'm very happy I got my CSSP. I think I might even have the CSSP prep guide somewhere. Of course, it's outdated because I got it 20 years
a while ago. Yeah, yes. So even my version here is out of date because we've just released a new one in April. So yeah, so we have to keep up to date. I completely agree. For me, and I've talked about it in the past as well, for me the CISSP was a pivoting point in my career, not because I learned new things. I mean, 90% I think of what the certification held at the time were things that I knew, but I was working in the industry for over a decade at the time, so it makes sense. But it helped boost my confidence, and it sort of gave me that external recognition that personally I needed to also overcome imposter syndrome. Because when you're the only woman in the room, it's very easy to think that, oh, I'm not good enough, oh, I don't know. And I hear that from a lot of women, so I do encourage women, take certification. I would encourage you to take the CISSP, but you can take any certification, educate yourself, and sort of build your, if you need that external help to build your confidence, absolutely do it.
I was lucky to just learn from Angelina Jolie in the movie Hackers. She was the only female hacker in a group of boys, and her confidence just was, something that inspired me as well. I saw her not just as a prominent hacker in the film, she was really leading and making decisions and helping them save the day. If you haven't seen the movie, no spoilers, but I do recommend people watch it. Hackers from 1995. In fact, one of the cool events in the UK called EMF, Electromagnetic Field, which is a hacker camp with tents, so it's literally a camp out in the woods, recently hosted a screening of the movie together with Ian Softly, the director, and I think the movie still stands. I think it's still compelling, and I just really love the atmosphere that it provides for hackers.
That's so cool. Well, my go-to movie is still War Games. I absolutely love it. It's from 1984, and I absolutely love it when Matthew Broderick is a very young hacker, and he hacks the mainframe of the U.S. Department of Defense. It's a great movie. I highly recommend it.
That movie actually inspired the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. So It's an interesting story for the listeners. I believe it was President Reagan at the time, if I'm not mistaken. He saw the movie come out, and the legend goes that the President of the United States heard about the movie. Reagan used to be an actor himself, for those who know. And so he understood the power of Hollywood to maybe inspire young people. He asked some of his advisors whether a scenario as depicted in the film could be realistic. And they came back to him and they said, "We're sorry, Mr. President, it's a lot worse." And as a result of that, the legend in Washington, D.C. goes, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act was first drafted, and it came into force in 1986, so 2 years after the movie. As a result of that, in a way, and a result of a realization by the U.S. leadership that cybersecurity or cyber warfare could be a possibility, and that American teenagers could become hackers. So that's where that very influential criminal law came from, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act from 1986.
Yeah, so it's a great story, and I should try and find out if it's actually true, because I heard that myth before. We should try and find out.
Yes, let's ask Reagan. Or maybe ChatGPT. So, May, should we move on to the quick fire round?
Yes, so I always, as you know, you listen. So there's always the quick fire round, and I love those ping pong questions, whatever comes to mind, no right or wrong answers. So, outside your professional life, what is one life hack that you swear by to maintain your work-life balance?
Intermittent fasting. I'm a big proponent of intermittent fasting. So I have learned it from the Tim Ferriss books and podcast. Tim Ferriss is a really well-known life hacker, and I've followed quite a lot of his advice, but specifically intermittent fasting is the one thing I adhere to. It's not just for work-life balance, it actually helps me a little bit with my ADHD as well, and I find it to be really useful and for me beneficial. Of course, it's not for everybody, and you need to tailor your eating and fasting schedule according to your medical, personal, and life circumstances and preferences. But I found it to be very useful.
Fantastic. If you can teach one ethical principle to cybersecurity aspiring professionals, what would it be?
So I'm not
That's
necessarily
hard.
known as the friendly. I'm known as the friendly hacker, not necessarily as the ethical hacker. Ethics is a field that I consider to be really lofty and maybe somewhat philosophical. I think there's a good piece of advice for that goes in the medical world, and that's do no harm. So I think do no harm is a pretty good principle to live by.
I like it. I like it. If you can send a message now to the cybersecurity community 10 years from now, what would it be?
You got me there. That's a really good one. I want to make sure, because they'll watch it certainly in 10 years' time. So I want to make sure I give them some good advice. But it's for the people of the future, right? It's not for the people of the past. Okay.
We'll get to the post.
Maybe put some guardrails on ChatGPT and friends.
I like that.
Have some backups. Have some alternatives prepared.
Yeah. Think before you implement. How do you celebrate your achievements?
Wow, with a pint of beer, with my good friends, and a good meal, or a walk in a hike in the forest, in the woods, in someplace natural. It's something that I really enjoy whenever I can get the chance to do that. But there's really no substitute to having a good meal with good friends.
I love that, absolutely. And last but not least, one of my favorite questions. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
Okay. So first of all, don't lose that Bitcoin. Okay, that's one. And also don't buy beer and pizza with your Bitcoin, which is something I actually did. World's most expensive beer. Let me tell you, I went to a local cryptocurrency meetup around 2013, and I paid for my pizza and my beer with my Bitcoins. So maybe hold on to that would be my advice, and have some backups for all your cryptocurrencies. That's
good advice.
Even for right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Keren, thank you so much for joining me today. As always, it was a pleasure and an inspiration having you. And I hope to see you all next time here on CyberMAYnia.